for oil, a war for gold, a war for money, and a war for souls. A war on terror, a war on drugs, a war on kindness, a war on hugs, a war on birds, and a war on bees. They got a war on hippies.
Hi, I'm Liz Reese, and welcome to Voices of Resistance. Today's show is of an event that recently took place here in Honolulu at Church of the Crossroads on March 10th of this year, and it was hosted by the Chelsea Manning Support Network and Courage to Resist. And the name of the event was WikiLeaks whistleblower Chelsea Manning and U.S. military war resistors today. So I'm super stoked that someone was able to come down to Church of the Crossroads and tape the show so that everyone can see how awesome it was. I want to tell you just briefly about the three different speakers that you're going to see. Jacob Bridge is going to speak. He's an active duty Kaneohe Marine Bay officer who is a conscientious objector applicant. So total shouts out to Jacob and to, of course, all war and military resistors, because after all, they are the real and true heroes of this movement. And I want to really applaud Jacob for coming forward and telling his story, because it's really important for people who are speaking out against the military and against war to tell their story. You're also going to hear Kajihiro with Hawaii Peace and Justice, and the last speaker you're going to hear is Jeff Paterson. So I have to give a special shout out to Jeff Paterson. About 25 years ago, here on Oahu, Jeff Paterson was a former Kaneohe Bay Marine who publicly refused to deploy to the Gulf War. And not only is Jeff Paterson a good friend of mine, he was a huge inspiration to me at that time. You know, 25 years ago was kind of my first exposure into political activism, and especially around the anti-war movement, and seeing how truly courageous Jeff Paterson was to come forward and speak out and say, I refuse to go to the Gulf and I will not be a pawn for oil in the Middle East. And he gave a very powerful press conference speaking out against U.S. military intervention in the Gulf and why he refused to go. He actually sat down on the tarmac at Kaneohe Marine Corps Base and refused to get up and go. And of course you hear all these things, oh, he's a coward and he's this and that and panty ass and you name it. And you have to stop and think how truly courageous someone is to take that stand. So shouts out to Jeff Paterson and all the truly admirable war resistors, and shouts out to, of course, Chelsea Manning, and you're really going to enjoy the event that took place on March 10th at Church of the Crossroads. So enjoy. Thanks for watching Voices of Resistance.
Aloha everyone, thank you for coming tonight. Sorry we're getting started a little bit late. One of our speakers is not here yet, but we can work around that. This event, I want to say, is locally sponsored by the ACLU Foundation of Hawaii, Hawaii Peace and Justice, Hawaii People's Fund, Revolution Books Honolulu, World Can't Wait Hawaii, and also I'd like to acknowledge the Church of the Crossroads. Overall, our host is the Chelsea Manning Support Network and Courage to Resist. I think it's important for us to really take that concept in, courage to resist. We're going to be hearing a lot about that tonight. I'm Nancy Alec with Hawaii People's Fund. We're a public foundation that supports justice and social change. Since 1972, the People's Fund has been there as an ally and a resource for unpopular causes. Standing firm and speaking out against war and militarism can be lonely, isolating, and even dangerous, especially in such a heavily militarized place like Hawaii. Tonight, we'll hear from 3 people who have the courage to resist. We'll hear from each of them, and then we'll take questions after everyone has spoken. Before you get too comfortable, sir, you're first on the list. Is that okay? First is Kajihiro, who is the most fully informed and outspoken activism regarding the military in Hawaii, the octopus, and its multi-legged impacts. So welcome, Kyle Kajihiro.
Okay. Thank you for that warm welcome, and I'm sorry for all the suspense. I was just, we have a swim practice after school and work and stuff, so it's a rush to get here. So I want to thank Church of the Crossroads, Jeff, Nancy, Jake. It's an honor to be here, and I was just asked to talk about the military situation in Hawaii as a kind of a quick update. So I just want to, first thing I want to say is just it's important to situate the military historically, and to recognize that Hawaii was a fulcrum of the U.S. military, the first military pivot of American empire, from a continental empire to one that spanned 2 oceans, and that used the geography of Hawaii, its geopolitical location, its unique geographic resources, namely Keavalao Pu'uloa, or Pearl Harbor, as most people know it today. Used that as the geography with which to expand American power, right, from the west coast of North America, and leverage that power to reach the shores of Asia. And China was the prize at that time. So just to kind of keep that in mind. And as a result, Hawaii became both a casualty of American empire and an accessory to the crimes of that empire. And so this is the kind of the contradictory role and function that we play in present-day geopolitics that I think we just have to be mindful of. While we're addressing the problems that the military has caused in the islands, the unlawful occupation of the Hawaiian Kingdom, an independent kingdom, the taking of lands which are still used for military training, the cost on the environment, culture, and so forth, but also what that training is used for and who it's used against. The wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam before that, Korea, these were skills and techniques that were perfected using our lands here in Hawaii in order to wage those wars. So we have dual kuleana to address that. And Nancy mentioned the octopus, so that's the next point I want to make is just using that metaphor of the he'e, a monstrous octopus. Kaleko Ka'eo described Hawaii as the head of this octopus. So if you can kind of just keep that image in mind, and the brain of this octopus would be the Pacific Command headquarters up in Halawa Heights, right, which is the headquarters of the U.S. Pacific Command, the largest and oldest of the United States Unified Commands. Its area of responsibility goes from the west coast of North America to the central Indian Ocean, from Alaska all the way to and including Antarctica. So most of the surface of the planet, majority of the world's population falls within this U.S. Pacific Command. But that nervous system of this he'e would be the supercomputers and fiber optics that connect it all together, right? What are the eyes of this octopus? If you look up at the top of our mountains, Haleakala, Koke'e, Ka'ala, Ka'ena Point, you'll see radomes and tracking stations. So these are all the sensors that are watching. They're watching things in space. They're watching things flying around. They're tracking objects. They're used to train and practice missile launches. And so these are the eyes that are of this octopus. Its ears would be, if you ever drive out to Wahiawa, past Wahiawa town, and you get Whitmore Village on the right, tucked away there in the old pineapple fields, kind of buried into the rock, the bedrock, is the Naval Master Communications Computer and Telecommunications Master Center, as well as the National Security Agency listening post. So the Regional Signals Intelligence Center is in that site. It's sort of hard to see because it's behind a lot of grass, tall grass in Koahaule, but it's in there, and you see these dishes, right? So they're listening. they're listening. Cell phones, emails, all that stuff is being scooped up. And this was where Edward Snowden worked. The excrement, the kukai of this he'e, can be symbolized by the toxic shadow, the toxic stain that has been left behind in our landscape. And Ke'awalau o Pu'uloa, Pearl Harbor, would be sort of emblematic of that. Something like 750 contaminated sites within the Pearl Harbor complex alone. I would estimate there's over 1,000 contaminated sites throughout the islands, right? Everything from unexploded ordnance to depleted uranium, radioactive cobalt-60 in the sediment of Pearl Harbor. There's several plumes of diesel fuel, jet fuel, even perchloroethylene and other solvents on the water table. Substances like mercury and lead, ash from landfills in Manana and Waipio. These have toxic carcinogens like dioxins and PCBs. So we have the excrement of this monstrosity that continues to live on even after a lot of those lands have been decommissioned as active military sites. And then, of course, the octopus has its tentacles, and so we can see these tentacles reaching out across the Pacific. They are grabbing at our brothers and sisters around the region in Guam, in the Marshall Islands, in Okinawa, where there's a tremendous struggle right now to oust the Marine Corps base and to prevent the expansion of a base in Henoko, in Korea, in Japan, even all the way to Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, where a whole population was evicted in order to make way for one of the most strategic U.S. Bases in the planet. And so these are the tentacles. And if you're a fisherman and you've ever caught he'e, you know that if you cut off a tentacle of a he'e and the thing gets away, it'll grow back, right? So if you look at what happened to the Philippines, U.S. bases were expelled over 20 years ago. And after September 11, we've seen special forces come back into the southern Philippines to do training, right, and advising in their counterterrorism activities. And then soon after that, there was an expanded visiting forces agreement, and now an enhanced visiting forces agreement, which allows the U.S. to utilize pretty much most Philippines bases. So it's sort of like pre-positioning and using it on demand, right? You have on-demand military bases. So the U.S. doesn't have to manage or take care of the facilities. They just utilize another country's base and then come in and set up shop and activate when they need to. So this is the new model of military basing that's happening, to sort of have these austere remote bases that can be activated at will when it's needed. And that way it's less overhead, but it creates this spatially comprehensive network of bases that can be used. So it's very strategic in that sense. And it goes along with the new emphasis on technologies of space technology, satellites, and all of that, and the communication systems that are up there. And then those, of course, network with drones, right? So the remote controlled killing that's become so prominent under the Obama administration is the new wave. And it uses these austere sites as part of that network for coordinating their activities. So this is the tentacles, and this is what we have to also be mindful of. Just briefly, what it means for Oahu or for Hawaii itself is that today about 230,000 acres of land are under military control. On the island of Oahu, 24.6% of the island is military controlled. So that's a pretty large amount. I mean, I think the only comparable places are Okinawa and Guam, which are about similar percentage-wise. So, that for a small island to have that larger percentage of land controlled by the military, and most of that land are the Hawaiian ceded lands or the Hawaiian Kingdom lands that were wrongfully taken, we still have an active problem, right? The overthrow is still with us. It's still, it's not a thing of the past it has present consequences. And that's why we have this troubled relationship with the military in Hawaii, right? Around land use, around sovereignty, and so forth. A couple of the sites where things are happening right now. Makua Valley, we've just celebrated 10 years of no live fire training, thanks to the work of Malama Makua, the lawsuits, the protests. But the Army is, in fact, this week there's some meetings where the Army is talking about their environmental studies, and they're hoping to get the approval to begin training, to resume training. And so this is a fight that we have to pay attention to and support when the call comes. Pohakuloa, of course, is the site for most of the expansion in Hawaii, and so Kuching and Maxine Kahauleliu are both plaintiffs in a lawsuit challenging the state of Hawaii to do a better job of protecting those lands, which are basically the ceded lands, the Hawaiian land assets, from the military. Thousands of acres up there are leased from the state to the U.S. military for 65 years for $1, right? So I could, that's a pretty good deal, right, in Hawaii. So we want to end those leases. They come due in 2029, but we say enough already, cut it off. So anyway, this lawsuit is going on, but meanwhile, the expansion is happening up there. There's been the other expansion threat that's happening is with the Marine Corps. They're one of the forces that are expanding tremendously throughout the Pacific. So Mokapu is Kaneohe Marine Base is one site that's slated for the expansion of these Osprey tilt rotor aircraft. So they look like helicopters that can tilt their rotors this way and fly like an airplane, right? Very dangerous, very expensive. The government didn't want it, but the Marine Corps kept slipping it into their budget and keeping it alive. And so there's about 28 of these, I think, they're supposed to come to Hawaii. It's not going to only be limited to Mokapu. They want to train everywhere from Kauai all the way to Pohakuloa on the Big Island, including Molokai and some other places. So there's been some shifts in their plans, but it could affect many parts of the island when and if they come, as well as they've destroyed some Hawaiian cultural sites on Mokapu to expand the hangar for these monstrous aircraft. So that's been a fight that some of the families from that area have been waging. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to stop those expansions from happening, so it's still proceeding. Some good news is in Waikane Valley on the windward side. The military leased those lands from the Kamaka family during World War II, promised to return it after the war and clean it up. The lands came back, but they were contaminated, and so the Marine Corps condemned about 179 acres of the Kamaka family lands there. Uncle Raymond Kamaka fought this for many years. He just passed away last year. But the good news is his vision of getting those lands cleaned up is proceeding. And so I sit on a restoration advisory board that has been pushing the Marine Corps to clean it up to the highest level possible. And it looks like it will be possible for at least the productive lands near the stream bed, the flat areas that could be farmed again. It looks like those areas could be cleaned up to unrestricted use standard of cleanup, which is very good. Some of the slopes are hard to get to, and those will be still hazardous. But we look forward to the time when those lands can come back. So that's not a question at this time, but the community is still pushing for that to happen in the future. And then just the last thing I'll talk about is just there's been some news about the Army potentially downsizing in Hawaii. So some of us, of course, celebrate that possibility and are encouraging that to happen. The business community, many of the politicians and some unions are very much against it, and they've been organizing to what is it, not save our heroes, something like that. Keep our heroes. Keep our heroes. The heroes need saving. Anyway, so that's an interesting situation because it's a convergence of a number of things. Because on the one hand, you say, well, if the military is expanding, if Obama's doing this pivot to the Pacific, right, to counter China and rebalance all their military forces, why is there a downsizing underway? So it's a couple of things, I think. One is the budget crisis the U.S. is in. They're finally having to make cuts in the military budget. So it's hitting the Army probably the hardest. They have to make a 100,000 troop cut across the board. They're looking at 30 bases where it could happen, and about 19,800 troops could potentially be cut from bases in Hawaii, Schofield and Shafter. Okay, so they're in the process of studying that. The other thing that's going on is the Army is sort of becoming obsolete, at least in the way it's been configured in the past, it's not the kind of wars that are happening anymore, right? It's like drones with special forces or expeditionary kinds of warfare. So more of the burden is shifting to these special forces, more of the resources, and also the Marine Corps. And so the Army is trying to fight for its relevance in this new era and hold on to its assets. But meanwhile, the momentum or the shifting of priorities is forcing them to make some of the hardest cuts. So I think that's another thing that's happening, and what some of the one of the proponents of the Army downsizing has been, that's part of his analysis. The other thing is that, so some of the countervailing forces, though, is that because Obama has announced this pivot, and because he has this tie to Hawaii, there's a lot of symbolic, sort of capital resting on him showing that Hawaii is still very important for the military. So even though it's from a military standpoint, it's far away for an army, it's very hard to deploy a lot of army troops with their big tanks, their strikers, to a fighting area. It's just as effective to deploy from someplace like Washington or another location. Despite all of that, to show that the Army is downsizing in a place like Hawaii would send the wrong geopolitical signal, and so that countervails this downsizing. So we don't know how that's going to balance out in the Pentagon. The other factor is that this is one of the first events of the post-Inouye era. So the Army, the military in Hawaii has been sort of artificially propped up in many ways because of the political economy of the military, political machine. And Senator Inouye single-handedly, he's an institution, right? So he had so much clout to be able to leverage money into projects that often the military didn't request or didn't want, right? The Pentagon didn't request many projects. $80 million for a new Pacific Command headquarters facility. They didn't request it, but Senator Inouye said, you're going to want this, and he stuck it in the budget. So that's how a lot of these projects happen. You notice a lot of construction on military bases. It's sort of driven by those types of political, economic considerations. With him not there, the new congressional representatives from Hawaii are trying to position themselves to be strategic in Washington, but they have low, they don't have as much clout, right? And so there's going to be politics that are pulling money to other places. And I think rather than see that and approach that with fear and dread, I think it's an opportunity that we should embrace and figure out how do we move forward to try to transition Hawaii from this military-dependent economy to something else that's forward-looking and that utilizes our assets and builds up our capacities for the future. So I'll just stop there, and thank you for.
I'm gonna go up and down, so she's giving me the mic back and forth. Thank you, Liz. Okay, I'd like to introduce next First Lieutenant Jacob Bridge. It's rare that an individual still on active duty will speak out. Jacob Bridge is awaiting approval of his application as a conscientious objector. So let's recognize his courage as we welcome him. Jacob Bridge.
How's that? Can everybody hear me? Good? Two things I would like to address. First, I'm going to get really red, so just deal with that. Second, all these opinions are my own. None of them are the government, the military, the Marine Corps. So now that that's over with, we can get into the good stuff. I'm from New Jersey. I'm from central New Jersey, just north of central. And when 9/11 happened, I was in 7th grade. I was 13 years old. And the Twin Towers were something we could see from maybe a 5-minute drive from my house. We could see it from a lookout called Washington Rock, which is, I think, where Washington had once looked out upon New York and the vista. So we used to be able to see the Trade Center, and then, am I too close to this? Okay, I'm just getting used to it. And then once they were gone, it was just a plume of smoke. And as a kid, that was a big deal to me, and it was a big part of my identity. And I remember watching the replays every year over and over again. When those planes flew into the towers, it felt like they were flying into my heart, especially as a little kid. And my dad used to work there, and luckily he wasn't there that day, but New York City was a big part of my New Jersey identity. back then I didn't really know what language to use to describe that feeling. Unfortunately, the language was given to me, and it was that they hate us for our freedom, and we must go kill everybody in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I believed it, and that played a huge part in why I decided to join the military. So I went to college. It was going to be Army, but eventually I'd heard enough stories about the Marines that I knew I had to go there. I have a trend for always picking the hardest thing to do and just going after it. So I went to the University of Colorado at Boulder. I joined the Naval ROTC Corps there. I commissioned top of my class, honor graduate out of about 40 commissionees. From there, I went to a basic infantry school for every single Marine officer has to go there, 6 months long in the hills of Quantico, Virginia. And I graduated from there 22 out of like 270, so well within the top 10%. And I didn't really necessarily enjoy the training, but I knew that the people that would be working for me and America in general demanded that I'd always try my hardest, always give everything I had, so I generally performed really well. Again, not because it was easier, because I liked it. So I arrived here in 2013, late February, early March, and already, right when I got here, I noticed a good deal of cognitive dissonance, and things just didn't feel right. And it wasn't like I was told it would be. All throughout training, you're told that training is the worst part. Training's awful. You're gonna hate training, but when you get to the real Marine Corps, everything's great. Don't worry about it, because it's the best. It was like this fairy tale magical wonderland that I was just so excited to get to. And I got here, and it was like this total letdown, because I just wasn't enjoying it. And what I figured out was the reason why people love the real Marine Corps so much and hate training is because in training, the standards and regulations are rigidly and strictly enforced, because that's how they grade you, and that's how they figure out who's in it for the real deal and who just is there for whatever, maybe an ego boost. I, unfortunately, like training better because then you really knew what people stood for. And it seemed to me that out here, a lot of times, the leaders that I worked with, my peers and the people I worked for, it seemed to me that they were operating under the do as I say, not as I do principle, which was really disturbing to me and was a big problem that I couldn't reconcile on my own. So I started seeing a therapist. I'd been seeing a therapist for other reasons since 2010. So from March to October or September, I was doing a lot of thinking and just soul searching, wondering what I could do. I wanted to fix the Marine Corps. That was my big thing, was I wanted to fix the Marine Corps. I would just make everybody good again. And I mean, I had seen leaders treat their subordinates like garbage, and these are people with families. And some of my peers, I knew one that would buy prostitutes regularly. People would drink and drive and then come to work and chastise and punish Marines who had been caught for doing the same thing. And that really did not sit well with me. So I had to think, I had to read, I had to meditate. And then in September of 2013, I was watching a documentary on Buddhism, which wasn't something I did often back then, but it just happened to be on, and I watched it. And I was learning about the Buddha, and I was kind of shocked that this guy was around 2,000 years ago, but all these things he was talking about, equality, racial equality, gender equality, equality among spiritual practices and religions. I'd never heard of something like that where somebody would say, like, oh, they're all good, instead of saying mine's the right one, and you have to follow mine. But there was one thing he said that really stuck with me, and I couldn't reconcile it, and I know enough now, after being in therapy for so long, that when I can't reconcile something, I don't let it fade away, because then it comes back and bites me years later and it hurts. So I keep it up here until I can figure it out and put it in its proper place. It was violence begets violence, and I didn't get it. It sounded right, but I didn't get it, because I've been taught that we use violence in the military to solve violence. There's a violent problem in Afghanistan. We're going to go kill it. There's violent problems all over the world, and we're just going to go kill it with our own violence, and everything will be great, because that's what I thought was the American way. Eventually, over the next months, while I was thinking, reading, listening, talking, I started seeing that he was right, and I was wrong. We were wrong. So then that was a problem. So if violence begets violence, the question to me became, then what am I doing? I'm here to help America, I'm here to help other people, but if violence begets violence, I don't know that I'm helping anybody. So that was a big problem for me. And then around March 2014, I began realizing, just because I'm involved and I care about some of my Marines who were LGBT, that the Marine Corps and my unit specifically wasn't going to recognize Pride Month, even though they had no reason not to, except that they hadn't been directly ordered to do it. And I got involved with the Pride Month push, and eventually I requested MAST, which is essentially saying, you talk to your boss and your boss's boss and your boss's boss's boss until you get somebody who can address your problem and fix it. And eventually, myself and another officer were able to get the majority of Marine forces in the Pacific to recognize Pride Month in June of 2014. It wasn't much, but it was something. It's a precedent that they're going to have to follow now. They can't march that one back. But that led me on to the question of, if we can't even treat our own Marines, sailors, soldiers with respect and with the respect that they're due, how can we be trusted to make decisions on who we're going to kill in a country that we've never been to before? We can't even treat our own people well. These were just all these questions that kept adding up until May 20th. I woke up in the middle of the night from a dream that I can't really describe, except that I woke up and I remembered that someday I'm going to die and that there's just no time to waste. There was no time to waste doing anything I didn't like to do, and I definitely wasn't going to be a part of killing anybody anymore. And I woke up, and one of the first things I thought was, oh yeah, Conscientious Objector, I'll just do that. And the next day, I found my chaplain, and I told her it wasn't a question of if, it was a question of when, and to expect my application. So over the next couple weeks, I was furiously writing my application, and on June 16th, I submitted it to my command. And after hearing all the horror stories, I thought that it was going to be pretty awful, but I knew that I had to approach it in a way that wasn't offensive and that wasn't, demanding certain things. I just kind of approached it with the attitude that I'm going to get what you're going to give me. And I didn't really have any ground to stand on. I was kind of at their mercy. So luckily, I've been treated a lot better than I thought. I've been given a job that doesn't conflict so much with my views. I have found that some people do treat me differently because, as ironic as it sounds, they're a little bit scared of my opinions, although I think it's very strange that being somebody who doesn't want to kill anymore can be terrifying to anybody. But for the most part, the people who, kind of looked at me like, at first, once they got to talking to me again and working with me, they realized I'm still the same Jake. I just did something they don't understand, but I think eventually they will, and I'm not offensive about it, and I don't expect everybody to have the same views or opinions as me, and I'm not angry that they don't. The best way I've had it put is that we only know what north is in relation to south, and same thing for east to west. So if they weren't so staunchly opposed to the things I hold dear, I wouldn't know what I believed. And that's kind of how I go, is I know that they really think that way, and I hate it. I disagree. So I know who I am. So sometimes when I'm really in the middle of a debate, I just like to thank the people and then leave it at that. I knew then, though, June 16th, that I had about a half tank of gas left as far as motivation goes for this job, and I could wait until December for a decision. As you could see, I made it through December, so I was kind of running on fumes in January. At this point, I feel like I'm out of the car and pushing, but I've got a good support network now. I've met Jeff, and I've had a support network the whole way, and now I kind of feel like you guys are here helping me push the car too. So thank you all for coming out and just showing your support. I really appreciate it. And that's my story.
We all need people helping us when we're running on fumes, hopefully before we get to that point. I think everyone in this room is an activist in one way or another, and we rely on the history of mentors and examples. So before I introduce our final speaker, I just want to offer a moment to honor one of our activists who passed away today. Brother Pete Thompson left us. So we could just have a moment of silence for Pete. Thank you. I know Pete exhibited courage and resistance at many points throughout his life. I'm going to ask the project director of our host organization to come up and speak about the case of Chelsea Manning, whose conscious actions exposing U.S. atrocities has led to a 35-year sentence in the military prison. Jeff Paterson also led the campaign supporting Lieutenant Aaron Watada, who in 2006, a local boy, called out the naked emperor and refused to participate in an illegal war. 15 years earlier, Jeff himself made history when, as a young Marine at Kaneohe, he refused to be deployed to Iraq. He sat down on the tarmac. Jeff knew at that time he had supporters in the community, but at that moment he was alone and exposed, sitting on the runway, surrounded by armed men who were ready for war and probably really pissed off at him. So welcome to another courageous resistor, Jeff Paterson.
Did I put it tall enough?
I think so. Anyways, thank you for having me tonight. Nancy kind of touched on it. I'm the project director of Courage to Resist. It's hard to imagine, but it's been 10 years. We've been doing this work for 10 years, supporting war resistors, conscientious objectors, and now we've expanded our role to cover people in the military who are facing repercussions for speaking out, whistleblowers. And that obviously, probably First Class Manning sort of pushed us in that direction. Next. As Nancy mentioned, 25 years ago this fall, 1/4 of a century, I was stationed in Kaneohe like Lieutenant Jacob back there. I was not a lieutenant. I was just a artillery corporal. I had my own crew of peons to yell at and order around, and people yelled at me all the time. I spent years in Korea and Okinawa in Japan, and mainland Japan, and the Philippines. And when I got to Hawaii, it was amazing because there wasn't the overwhelming sense of poverty and desperation and oppression that I saw in those countries. It took a while for me to realize the injustices that were going on right behind the facade of Waikiki and the bright lights. I was an artillery controller. I was went to a special school, nuclear, biological, and chemical, but my job was to assemble the fuses on the tactical nuclear warheads we used in our artillery, the 198 millimeter artillery. And I was getting ready to deploy when Iraq invaded Kuwait. I was packing my bags like the rest of them until our company commander explained that if anything went wrong in Iraq, it would be my job to set the fuse so we could nuke all the ragheads. And there was other people in the room with me, and they all started jumping up and down, shouting, "Kill the ragheads," like Marine Corps grunting. And I realized I did not belong. I did not want to set any nuclear fuses. I didn't want to do any of that. And then I realized if I didn't want to do that, why would I want to simply shoot my regular cannon with regular high explosives on people? And if I was questioning that, why would I raise my rifle to shoot somebody in the head? I filed for a conscientious objector discharge. A few weeks later, the military explained that I was sincere. But not sincere enough. They marched me out to the airstrip at Kaneohe right there, and there's an action shot of me literally sitting down, and that's only because I kept explaining to people, I'm not going, and they're like, yeah, just keep walking. And I'm a few feet from the steps of the airplane at that point. And that's my daughter, Claire, so you have to put up with her. And then they stripped me of my uniform, and they're the investigating officer there is showing me the planes leaving, and he's calling me a coward, and there's all kinds of stuff like that. But they gave me one last chance. If I just got on the plane, they wouldn't kill me when they returned from Iraq. They wouldn't hunt me down. They haven't hunted me down yet. I'm not that hard to find. Anyways, so 25 years ago. And the point of that is like, well, really, it's, what have you done lately? That's sort of the question I like to ask myself every now and then. So next slide. So lately, as in 10 years ago, I helped start this organization called Courage to Resist. I try to use my experiences fighting the military, but I never fought alone. I had people like Liz in the back there chanting outside of Kaneohe, doing songs and stuff for me. And it didn't take a whole lot, but it took a few people to inspire a few other dozen people, and then maybe 100 or so people got together. And that was enough to scare the hell out of the military, that there would be 100 people here on Oahu. They were standing up for resistors, and they remembered what happened here in this very church during the Vietnam War, when people refused to deploy to, or be drafted or deploy to Vietnam. And that was enough for me to not be sentenced to 5 years in prison, but to be released time served. And I tried to take those lessons. And these are some of the 200 people I could publicly point to that Courage to Resist has worked with over the last 10 years, people who spoke out against Iraq and later Afghanistan. We kept many of them from going to prison. We didn't keep all of them from going to prison. But when they went to jail, it wasn't because they didn't have a quality legal team. It wasn't because they didn't have support. Simply the military hated them more than we can muster support. Next slide. And up until 2006, we were a relatively community-based volunteer organization. When Lieutenant Aaron Watada, a native of Oahu, came to us in Oakland and said he had a plan. He wanted us to help him unfold that plan, publicly speaking out and explaining how the war in Iraq was illegal. And at the same time, we had other resistors facing long prison sentences. We knew that we had to become more of a full-time organization. And since 2006, working with Aaron, I relocated to Washington State to work with him for a few months. And I've been a full-time organizer, traveling for Courage to Resist since then. And we've sent attorneys and activists to Japan and to the Philippines and to Kuwait, to Germany, to work with U.S. objectors who were working and speaking out and refusing to fight, and as well as Canada. But it was obviously very proud of Aaron, and despite his actions, it's important to realize Aaron, because of the community support and because of a fantastic attorney, Eric Seitz from Honolulu, Eric never spent a day in jail. Next slide. Some of the cases we're working on today, Andre Shepard, just the last week, we have conflicting opinions from the European Union and the Germany High Courts regarding this U.S. soldier who has been seeking political asylum in Germany since 2006, a long time. Germany obviously found that the Iraq War was illegal, and that's a legal settled question. However, there's immense pressure from the United States government to not give political asylum to Andre, and so this case simply goes around and around and around, and he has been living in this legal limbo, and he's been doing so much like the over 100 U.S. service people that still reside in Canada who sought refuge there during the last 10 years. Kimberly Rivera was one case that we lost. She was deported from Canada about 18 months ago. She was sentenced to a year in prison. While she was in prison last year, she had to give birth shackled to a hospital gurney. All this for somebody who took her husband and kids to escape returning to Iraq and seeing the death and carnage. But we also win some. Sarah Benning, a resistor that had gone AWOL 4 or 5 years ago and didn't go to Canada, didn't go to Germany, but simply lived among us and actually became an activist herself in the anti-war movement. She faced a decade in prison for 2 counts of desertion. However, our legal team and her supporters in Colorado won her time served, and now she's free and moving on with her life. And you see Sarah on the left is Sarah in the military, Sarah on the right, Sarah not in the military, and I can tell you she's much happier on the right. Next slide. I'm here tonight to talk to you about the fight to save Private First Class, former Private First Class Manning. Next slide. Briefly, I'm not sure I'm telling anybody anything new. Private Manning was tried for providing the WikiLeaks website a number of important documents, and when I say a number, 250,000. One of them being the collateral murder video of here Reuters journalists and their bodyguards and some local community members are being gunned down by 2 Apache helicopters. The people who then try to save the lives of the wounded people. So the Reuters journalists are wounded. A makeshift ambulance comes to try to pick them up, put their bleeding bodies into the local ambulance, and then the Apaches then obliterate the ambulance as well. And that shocked a lot of people. Next slide. Manning was also charged with the Iraq war logs and the Afghan war diaries, and these were many, 250,000, battlefield reports. Simply maybe a lieutenant Bridge walking around Afghanistan, something happened, and he just jots down what happened. A bad guy came, we killed him. Maybe a bad guy got in the way, he's dead too. We don't know if he was a bad guy or not. And that's literally it. So you have these 250,000 entries in that. But from there, the importance of that is that for the first time, thousands of Iraqi families knew what happened to their loved one who went out for milk or to get water on a particular day in a particular region and simply disappeared. And for the first time, thousands of collateral damage, civilian casualties were accounted for in these documents that had never been accounted for before. And also, Manning released the Afghan war, or I was going to say, what's missing here is the Guantanamo files. And these were assessments of the Guantanamo detainees. And for the first time, we had proof that most of the detainees at Guantanamo were not the worst of the worst, and that the U.S. actually believed nearly half of them to be innocent of any crimes, but they were simply being held because we didn't know where else to put them. And we had these assessments of interrogators who believed people to be innocent, but still were tortured anyways because that was the orders from above. So anyways, this greatly helped the attorneys that were working for these detainees to ever find justice. Now for the first time, they could actually talk about the names of these people because they were classified and secret before, for example. And additionally, Manning released the State Department cables. And in large part, that incurred the wrath of one Hillary Clinton, who has not forgiven Manning yet. Next slide. I put this up there because based on this is why I became involved and agreed to work for Manning. And this was a chat log with the person who eventually turned Manning in to the FBI. And this is the FBI informant asked Manning, why did you do these things, provide these documents to WikiLeaks? And Manning's reply, God knows what happens now. Hopefully worldwide discussion, debates, and reforms. If not, we're doomed as a species. I will officially give up on the society we have if nothing happens. The reaction to the video gave me immense hope. I want people to see the truth. And here basically sums up why Manning basically knowingly forfeited his life, his freedom, to provide the American people these documents. And you could say that's crazy, knowingly forfeited your life. And that is crazy. And it's so crazy that is an idealistic thing that people do. Young people do idealistically crazy things all the time, like joining the United States Marine Corps, as me and Jake knows. Next slide. And Manning was right to some degree. The State Department cables did help fuel the Arab Spring. They did help unravel the story behind Guantanamo. And they did uncover all these back channel double dealings that the State Department was doing with these different countries. Meaning they were telling the people of these countries one thing, and they were doing something completely different. For example, in Haiti, they were trying to block increasing the minimum wage while publicly saying that they didn't care one way or the other. But the State Department was clearly taking this side of U.S.-based textile companies to keep wages suppressed in Haiti. Next slide. Manning was arrested in May 2010. Shortly thereafter, transferred to Quantico. That's when our support group was formed, and we started protesting at Quantico. But at Quantico, he was subjected to torturous conditions. She didn't see the light, the sun, for weeks at a time. She was forced to stand naked while guards screamed at her. And when she reacted, they punished her for reacting in a non-military manner, for example. Next slide. And it was only because of really amazing efforts. Nearly 1 million people around the world took action, signed petitions. There was internal debate within the administration itself. P.J. Crowley was the Assistant Secretary of the State Department for Public Affairs. Had to resign after criticizing his boss, Hillary Clinton, and the president for treating Manning in an illegal manner. United Nations head investigator of torture, Amnesty International, all of those and protests around the world, we were able to win Manning's humane treatment pending trial. And this was before she was found guilty of anything. Next slide. The court-martial of U.S. Private First Class Manning, we assembled a team of activists to move to Fort Meade, home of the NSA, and lived there for much of a year as the proceedings went on. This allowed us to have a protest every single morning before the trial, starting at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. to try to pack the courtroom throughout the night, then write up our summation of what happened that evening and then post it that evening in order to help fuel people's awareness of the trial. The military doesn't allow any recordings of any kind, so our support network hired professional transcribers to sit there every day and to actually transcribe everything that occurred and to provide that to the media outlets, because media outlets actually didn't have the energy to do that kind of real work themselves. And it was expensive, like $100,000. Just a couple of highlights that I enjoyed from sitting there in the shadow of the NSA, watching the military try Private First Class Manning. And I would say the military didn't really call the shots. Behind the military prosecution team were rows of people every day that represented the State Department, the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA, and other acronyms that nobody had ever heard of or officially didn't exist. And notes went back and forth between the people that were really calling the shots up to the military prosecutors. But a hero of mine, Dan Ellsberg, leaked the Pentagon Papers. He's being dragged out of the courtroom after he simply reached over to shake Private Manning's hand during a recess. And there, Private Manning is pointing to the size of his cell as it was marked out on the court ground there, and how his bed was. And Manning was explaining how that if he was sleeping, her head turned away from the guard, that the guard would start banging the nightstick on the cell in order to wake her up and to ensure that she was okay. So imagine somebody doing that throughout the night as you try to sleep with all the lights on, and for doing that for weeks at a time, then months at a time, and then being forced to stand naked during the day. That's sort of a brief description of what she was subjected to. And then during all this time, supporters, this is the first day of the actual trial, we all wore truth t-shirts because we wanted to underscore that this was about the truth. Manning risking everything to provide the American people the truth. But we were ordered to turn our truth t-shirts inside out because it was inappropriate to try to influence the court with this message of truth. That's me on the far right. I don't think I look like that, but we couldn't really afford a really expensive artist. Next. On Fort Meade, they had never seen anything like it. We organized a demonstration of well over 1,000 people. And this is on Fort Meade property. And this was without permission from the general of Fort Meade. This was daring the local police to enforce these ambiguous laws of public streets and public sidewalks on technically military property with signs that say no trespassing and no protest. And yet we still were able to gather well over 1,000 people. And this is just one day of us assembling before the trial with our truth shirts representing Manning as everybody goes in through the front gate to work. And we did that day after day. Next slide. And meanwhile, thousands of people around the world, including here in Honolulu, took action. And this is San Francisco Pride. We organized the Manning contingent. It was one of the largest Pride contingents ever in the history of San Francisco Pride, which is the largest Pride parade and festival on Earth. Next slide. And what did we get for all that? Manning faced over 140 years. The judge found Manning guilty of illegally. The judge found the military guilty of mistreating Manning in violation of Article 13 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. She also convicted him of violating the Espionage Act and nearly all other offenses. However, she was acquitted of aiding the enemy, which was a great victory for us. That was a death penalty offense there. Manning was sentenced to 35 years in prison, about 12,750 days. The judge could have reduced that sentence by 100% based on the military's torture of Manning. Instead, she chose the arbitrary number of 112 days. This is very important because the military is basically being given permission here to arrest a soldier, torture that soldier if as long as they believe that they can get a long prison sentence at the end of the day, there's no real repercussions for mistreating and torturing a soldier in their custody. If they can get 50 years at trial, and then assume maybe they'll get 1 or 2 years knocked off, basically the whole protection against illegal pretrial punishment goes out the window. And we think that's an important issue that is going to be central in the upcoming appeals. Next slide. Chelsea E. Manning. Obviously, many of you probably noticed how I switched pronouns throughout my talk, because up until this point, we were dealing with a person who identified as a young gay male, young man. And that's how I got to know her. The day after sentencing, she released a statement. As I transition into this next phase of my life, I want everyone to know the real me. I am Chelsea Manning. I am female. Given the way I feel, I have felt since childhood, I want to begin hormone therapy as soon as possible. I hope that you will support me in this transition. Now, as activists, we just spent tens of thousands of dollars doing a video with Oliver Stone and Hollywood celebrities about we're Bradley Manning. We just made a bunch of T-shirts. I am Bradley. This was not a shock. But she wasn't planning on doing that at that time. But when she got to Leavenworth, the guards and the facility there at Leavenworth just told her straight up, they don't want to hear anything about this gender nonsense. We heard the rumors. You're a guy, you're going to be treated like a guy, that's it, you're not going to get any special treatment. So that's her reacting to that, and basically, a call for help from us. Next slide. I didn't know what to title this. Everything I wrote as a title didn't seem right, so I put Gender React. A lot of activists are not comfortable with the issue of trans persons in general. I have had no personal experience myself before getting to know Chelsea a few years ago now. But what I could tell you is that it's all part of the same package. The same idealistic young person who gave up her freedom to provide the American people with information to make a more informed judgment about U.S. foreign policy, and to do that knowing the repercussions and to say, hell with it, I have to be true to my ideas and myself, I'm going to do it. That's the same person who looked within her and said, I have to be true to myself, tell the world that I feel I am a woman and I want to go down that path to explore those options. The American Civil Liberties Union is doing a fantastic job of representing her pro bono in regards to all of her gender-related issues, and that frees us up, the support network, to gather all of our resources at the upcoming actual appeals in military court that are going to be challenging her 35-year sentence. She has legally changed her name to Chelsea Elizabeth Manning. We see that all the time on blogs, like, her name's still Bradley. Well, no, it's not. Her name's Chelsea, and we have court documents to show it. And this has been a very busy month for us. Last week, the U.S. Army Court of Criminal Appeals has ordered the military to stop using any male pronouns regarding the upcoming appeals process. And last month, Chelsea began hormone therapy treatments at Fort Leavenworth for the first time after the ACLU sued the military to give her gender-appropriate health care. And very interesting, right? The first soldier, the first military service person in the history of the U.S. military to undergo gender-related health care treatments. Technically, because Manning is in the military, and the military has decided to incarcerate her for these 3.5 decades, the military can't shirk their responsibility for adequate health care. And this is part of that adequate health care. Next slide. The upcoming appeals process is not just a rubber stamp. We are very excited to go into at least a dozen major deficiencies of law that Colonel Lynn, the original trial judge, obviously, she knew she was not doing the right thing, but she was going to give the prosecution and all the bosses what they wanted at the end of the day. Given that, trying to get to that outcome, she had to skirt the law in many different places. We have hired a new legal team to handle those appeals. The legal team of Nancy Hollander and Vince Ward out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, is now going over the trial record, the largest trial record of any U.S. military case in the history of U.S. military law, which means that's a lot of paper. I have a copy in my closet in the office, and it takes up most of my closet. This stage is the most important because unlike in the civilian world, we can't raise any new issues down the road. We have to take every possible angle and have the best argument before this upcoming hearing. Otherwise, we'll be precluded from raising it later down the road. There will be other appeals all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, but this is the most important because this, one, is they have to hear the case. Two, is that they have, this level of appeal has the ability to reduce the sentence by any amount that they deem appropriate. And that's Nancy Hollander. That's not her best photo, but that is her traveling through Spain with on a tour organized by Amnesty International to promote Chelsea's case around the world. Next slide. And Amnesty International has taken a fantastic lead on this case, as well as the ACLU. With their help, we are generating tens of thousands of letters to President Obama every day or every week, calling for clemency for President Obama to reduce Manning sentence. But realistically, we're hoping that when President Obama is leaving office, he'll have to at least think about signing the pardon or the clemency order for Chelsea Manning, while he probably signs off on a bunch of Democratic donors who got busted for tax evasion, right? But with Amnesty International's help, we are actually generating tens of thousands and eventually hundreds of thousands of those letters. So I think is it futile? I don't know. It's a chance, and we're about taking every chance we have. Next slide. Another local individual. Chelsea spent, I think, her 5th birthday behind bars in December, and Edward just sent this message along with many other sort of notable people. Happy birthday, Chelsea Manning. I thank you now and forever for your extraordinary act of service. I put that in there because most people are like, what's Snowden think about that? So here it is. That's what Snowden thinks about it. I like Snowden. I think he's a good guy. Next slide. And what's Chelsea doing? I can't tell you what her official job in the Fort Leavenworth prison is. I can tell you that at first she had a really crappy job that was making her miserable. Now she has a job that is sort of more of a 9-to-5. It's not making her miserable, and she's being treated pretty well by the guards. Her main complaints is sometimes people, refer to her as he, and they whisper behind her back about this or that. But she has not been subjected to any violence or mistreatment, and she has really no complaints in that. The support network is helping her fund a correspondence course through a college. But think about this. She has no internet access, but she's taking a correspondence course on the internet and computer networking, all via pencil and paper and book. But when she's not doing that, she's actually writing some really good stuff. She's been published in the New York Times, the UK Guardian, and a couple lesser newspapers. I'm very, I think her piece yesterday was probably her best article. She was published in the UK Guardian yesterday, calling on the CIA torturers and the leaders who approved their actions to face the law. Basically, she's like, I face the law. What about them? And she's also taken her sort of her background intelligence analyst to talk about ISIS, and the fog machine of war and how related to how the military basically corralled journalists in Iraq and Afghanistan to report what they wanted to have reported, not the truth. So anyways, she's not going away anytime soon, and she's just agreed to be a regular contributor for the UK Guardian. And all these articles could be found online. Next slide. On the UK Guardian, but if you're ever looking for a one-stop what is happening with Chelsea, chelseamanning.org, on Twitter, Facebook, we are Save Manning. This is a screenshot from this afternoon, updated every 2 or 3 days. And you also get t-shirts, posters, stickers, buttons, whatever swag you're looking for, and I brought some examples in the back there you can take home tonight. Next slide. Big question, do we abandon her now? What do you think? No. Yes, no. Next slide. And that's why I'm going to finish off with, we raised $1.5 million in the trial and that part for attorney's fees, $500,000, public relations to get her published. And that took a lot of work, and a lot of people donated a lot of money. I guarantee you, there's people in this room. It's harder now. The trial is not coming up. We're looking at this sort of extended appeals process. We're looking at people who supported Manning but were freaked out about the trans issue, sort of like walking away. All this is a pitch. I think Manning is worth getting up, advocating for. I'm hoping that people will continue supporting her in related to other issues, and I hope that you'll consider making a tax-deductible donation tonight via check or cash or whatever. We probably should have had a basket at this point. Imagine there's a basket floating around. I don't know, give all the money to Liz. She's very trustworthy. Liz is in the red back there. I don't see anybody with a hat I could borrow. But anyways, give money to Liz. Donations are tax deductible because the legal expenses are only one of the aspects of the work we do. We also do public education. If people are out there saying, I hate activists, I just want to give money to lawyers, we can do that for you. You can just give the money straight to the lawyers, but it won't be tax deductible. It's a trade-off. Or go online, chelseamanning.org/donate. Next slide. I wasn't even sure. That was the last slide. All right. One back. All right, keep that up. All right. Again, 25 years, a long journey for me. It's a privilege to be back here at the Church of the Crossroads. It's a privilege to be part of this community, even if it's a very, very extended way, even via Facebook and all this kind of stuff. But thank you for coming tonight. And I want to call up Jake and Kyle, and we want to take just any questions you have before we close out the evening.